In the quiet suburban neighborhood of Greenbrook, North Carolina, surrounded by trees, Lauren Harris gazed out the window of her cramped studio apartment at the landscape illuminated by the morning sun. Today was her birthday, which she shared with her twin sister Candace. Looking at the date circled in red on her worn calendar, Lauren let out a deep sigh that seemed to carry the weight of 34 years. After submitting her latest ghostwriting assignment at dawn, Lauren began preparing for her evening plans. She chose a simple navy cardigan and pulled her hair back into a practical ponytail. Her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror told a story that contrasted sharply with her sister Candace. Though they were twins, their personalities and lifestyles were as different as a flickering candle and a blazing spotlight. Lauren had worked as a freelance writer for 8 years, mostly ghostwriting romance novels and business memoirs. She found solace in the quiet solitude of her craft, taking pride in breathing life into other people's stories while her own remained unwritten. The income was unpredictable, barely covering rent and groceries, but it was enough for her simple, careful lifestyle. Her studio apartment was tiny, but it was a sanctuary filled with towering stacks of manuscripts, dog-eared notebooks, and a single window where dying plants struggled toward the light. Meanwhile, Candace worked as a beauty influencer with 15,000 Instagram followers and ran an online cosmetics shop. She thrived on being surrounded by ring lights and camera equipment, living what appeared to be a glamorous lifestyle. Her high-rise apartment was modern and spacious, every corner designed for maximum visual impact on social media. "Lauren, it's at 6 o'clock tonight. Don't be late," came her mom Victoria's voice over the phone with the usual hint of irritation that made Lauren's stomach tighten. "I know. The backyard barbecue, as usual, right?" "Yes," Candace organized everything. "She has prepared such a wonderful surprise for everyone." Her mom's voice suddenly brightened when she mentioned Candace's name, like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. Her voice always took on a special tone, warm and proud. "I'll be there on time." Lauren hung up and turned back to the cracked mirror, her reflection looking tired and worn. Since childhood, Candace had always been the center of her family, the gravitational pull around which everyone orbited. For her parents, Victoria and Richard Harris, Candace was their pride and joy, the shining star of the family whose light seemed to dim everyone else. Even when Lauren achieved excellent grades in middle school, it was Candace's makeup tutorials that dominated family conversations at dinner. On the day Lauren won a literary award in college, the dinner table was buzzing with talk about Candace's viral Instagram post about skincare routines. Even their birthday presents showed the difference clearly, like a harsh spotlight revealing favoritism. Candace received luxury skincare sets and designer accessories worth hundreds of dollars, while Lauren got discount store notebooks and generic gift cards that felt like afterthoughts. "You prefer simple things, don't you?" her mom would say with a dismissive wave, but the truth was that investing in Lauren was considered a waste by her parents. "Candace is our sun and you are the moon," her mom Victoria's words echoed in her head like a broken record. Though it sounded like a compliment on the surface, it actually meant she was a shadow, existing only to reflect someone else's light. Even in family photos, Lauren stood at the edge while Candace and her parents occupied the center, their smiles bright and genuine. Lauren's gaze fell on a small frame on her dresser, a photo with her great-grandmother Melody, the only face that looked at her with unconditional love. She was the only person who truly understood and appreciated Lauren's worth, who saw her talent when no one else bothered to look. "The time will come when your true worth is recognized, Lauren," her great-grandmother would often say, gently patting Lauren's shoulder with weathered hands. Great-grandmother Melody, who passed away 5 years ago, spent her final days in Lauren's cramped studio apartment while her parents and Candace rarely visited, citing their busy schedules and social commitments. Lauren held her great-grandmother's hand every day and read stories to her, watching her eyes light up at each carefully chosen word. "Lauren, I'm leaving something special for you," her great-grandmother said on her deathbed, entrusting Lauren with a small wooden box that felt heavy with secrets. "Open this when the right time comes. When you need it most, your heart will tell you." That wooden box was still carefully kept in the back of Lauren's closet, hidden behind old manuscripts and forgotten dreams. Occasionally she felt the urge to open it, but remembering her great-grandmother's words, she waited for the right moment to arrive. Spread out on the bed was a tablet displaying an article about her dad Richard's business decline, the numbers painting a grim picture. His used car dealership had been struggling for the past 3 years and recently had begun selling inventory at losses just to pay the bills. Lauren knew her parents were facing mounting debts and economic hardship, yet their priorities remained unchanged. Nevertheless, her parents continued to indulge Candace's extravagant spending habits and prioritize her demands over basic necessities. Last month they paid for Candace's professional photo shoot while turning down Lauren's modest request for help with laptop repairs, saying, "We're tight right now," with barely concealed irritation. Lauren picked up her worn canvas bag and checked for her keys, the metal cold against her fingertips. The evening light streaming through the window painted the room in a warm orange glow, creating false hope. Before heading out to the birthday barbecue, she paused, opened her closet and reached for her great-grandmother's wooden box, but stopped midway as something held her back. "Not yet," she whispered to the empty room and left the apartment. Having lived as the second fiddle in her family for 34 years, she would once again attend a family gathering with mixed emotions, still wearing her usual smile like a mask. Standing at the front gate of her parents' house, Lauren took a deep breath that did nothing to calm her racing heart. The backyard was decorated with string lights and folding tables, filled with neighbors and family friends chatting over beer and soda, their laughter echoing in the evening air. After checking her reflection in her phone screen and giving her shoulders a slight shake to steel herself, she walked in. "Lauren. You made it," her dad called from behind the grill, smoke rising around him like incense. Lauren walked toward a picnic table where her parents and Candace were already seated, chatting with drinks in hand and genuine smiles on their faces. Candace wore a flowing white sundress with a new designer watch gleaming on her wrist, catching the light with every gesture. In contrast, Lauren's navy cardigan looked plain and outdated, like something from a thrift store clearance rack. "Finally, you're here," Victoria's voice carried a slight tone of reproach that cut through the festive atmosphere. Looking at her phone, it was 3 minutes before the scheduled time, yet somehow she was still wrong. "You're not late, but everyone else is already here. Now sit down." Lauren silently took her seat, feeling the weight of disapproval settling on her shoulders. Appetizers were already laid out on the table and drinks had been poured, the party proceeding without her. Her dad Richard finally looked up as if just noticing her presence in the crowd. "Oh, Lauren. Happy birthday, sweetheart." "Thank you, Dad." The conversation naturally flowed to Candace's recent happenings, stories about brand collaborations she had secured, the luxury hotel she visited for content creation, and her newly launched makeup line that was taking off like crazy. Her parents listened attentively, asked enthusiastic questions, and nodded with genuine smiles that never appeared when Lauren spoke. When Lauren tried to talk about a novel she was ghostwriting or the success of a writing workshop she had organized, her mother merely said, "Oh, that's nice," while already turning toward Candace with renewed interest. After the main course, as dessert time arrived, Richard pulled an envelope from his pocket with theatrical flair. "Now, time for birthday presents," he said with a broad smile, handing the envelope to Candace first with obvious pride. "For the son of our family." Candace excitedly opened the envelope and read the paper inside, her eyes growing wide with delight. Her face lit up like a Christmas morning. A brand new iPhone 15 Pro Max in titanium? Really, she cheered and hugged her parents, bouncing with excitement. "You've worked hard building your brand, so this is your reward," her mom said, beaming with maternal pride. "That's the limited edition one. Perfect for your content creation and photography." "Our financial situation?" Lauren thought, her heart sinking as the math became clear. Despite Richard's struggling business and her parents' mounting debts, they were giving Candace a $1,500 phone without hesitation. She said nothing but was calculating in her mind that phone would cost the equivalent of 3 months of her grocery budget, maybe more. Now for Lauren. Victoria took out a small envelope from her purse, the difference in size immediately obvious to everyone at the table. Compared to Candace's envelope, it was clearly lighter and thinner, like an afterthought wrapped in false enthusiasm. Her mom handed it to Lauren with an exaggerated smile that didn't reach her eyes. "This should be enough for you, dear." Lauren quietly opened the envelope, her fingers trembling slightly as she revealed the contents. Inside was a single gift card for the local bookstore, worn around the edges. The amount showed $1,000, but the expiration date revealed it would expire in 2 weeks, making it nearly worthless. You're a writer. Use your imagination, her mom said with a dismissive laugh. Look at those books and pretend you're successful. Can't you do that? Richard softly laughed in agreement, the sound sharp as broken glass. You can live in fantasy through writing. You're a dreamer after all, not a businesswoman like Candace. Lauren remained silent, staring at the gift card as humiliation burned in her chest. A neighbor passing by frowned at the scene, clearly uncomfortable with the obvious favoritism. The family's unfairness was apparently obvious to him and everyone else watching. Hey, isn't that gift card the one I got for Christmas? Candace said with cruel realization. I was going to throw it away since I shop online anyway, but now it's become a present for Lauren. She giggled and looked down at Lauren with condescending pity. Why don't you enjoy the success feeling with that gift card? Real success wouldn't suit you anyway. Your novels don't even sell, do they? Lauren endured the humiliation in silence, her jaw clenched tight to keep from crying. For 34 years, she had grown accustomed to such treatment, each blow leaving invisible scars. Since her great-grandmother's death, no one truly understood her or saw her worth. But today something was different, a spark of defiance flickering to life. The moment she took the gift card, something inside her made a decision that would change everything. Thank you, she said quietly, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside. What's this? Suddenly being polite? Victoria mocked with false surprise. Usually you'd look disappointed and sulk for hours. I'm not disappointed, Lauren smiled, and for the first time, it felt genuine. Actually, I have birthday presents for all of you too. Everyone looked at her in surprise, conversations stopping around the table. It was unusual for her to prepare presents, especially ones that cost more than grocery money. Normally she would give handmade cards or signed copies of books she had ghostwritten at most. Presents? From you? Candace scoffed, her voice dripping with disbelief. You can't buy much with a ghostwriter's income, can you? What did you get us, bookmarks? Lauren took out a small wooden box from her bag, the weight of it feeling significant in her hands. It was what her great-grandmother Melody had left her, carved with intricate patterns that seemed to shimmer in the light. This is what great-grandma left me. She told me to open it today. Melody? Victoria said with disinterest, waving her hand dismissively. What about her? She was always filling your head with nonsense. Great-grandma told me to open it when the right time came, Lauren continued calmly, ignoring the dismissal. And today, on our birthday, I felt it was time to open this box. Her parents and Candace watched with mixed expressions of contempt and curiosity, like vultures circling prey. For them, the box probably contained old jewelry or at most a small savings account that might buy dinner. However, there was a strength in Lauren's expression that had never been there before, a quiet confidence that made them lean forward. She placed her hand on the wooden box and slowly opened the lid, the hinges creaking with age. The polished grain reflected the string lights, and the sound of the box opening seemed to drown out the surrounding conversations and clinking of glasses. Inside was a yellowed envelope and a small brass key, both items seeming to glow with hidden significance. Lauren carefully took out the envelope and opened it, her hand steady despite her racing heart. It was a letter in her great-grandmother Melody's handwriting, each word carefully formed with love. Dear Lauren, she began reading quietly, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent table. If you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer in this world and you are standing at an important crossroads in your life. Lauren closed her eyes for a moment, feeling tears threaten to spill. It was as if she could hear her great-grandmother's voice echoing in her head, warm and encouraging. True wealth lies within your heart. However, sometimes external wealth is also necessary, especially if it is used for the right purpose. What does it say? Did she leave you an inheritance? Victoria interrupted impatiently, greed flickering in her eyes. Ignoring her, Lauren continued reading, her voice growing stronger with each word. This key will open the door to your future. Only you know how to use it. What kind of key is it? Candace leaned forward to ask, her voice tight with sudden interest. A sudden light of desire appeared in her eyes, replacing her earlier mockery. There is something this key opens, Lauren said quietly, power flowing through her words. I want to show you all something. Would you come to my apartment? Now. Richard frowned, clearly annoyed at the interruption to his evening. It's late. Why not tomorrow when we can think clearly? No, today would be best. Lauren's voice was soft but unusually firm, carrying an authority that surprised everyone. Tonight is our birthday. Great-grandma also said I should open this box today. Though her parents and Candace looked displeased, they eventually agreed to leave the barbecue and head to Lauren's apartment, curiosity overcoming their irritation. Perhaps they thought that great-grandmother had left something valuable, something that could solve their financial problems. It had been at least 2 years since Lauren's parents and Candace last visited her studio apartment. Entering the cramped living space, the family looked around uncomfortably at the stacks of manuscripts and makeshift furniture. Please sit down, Lauren said politely and headed toward the kitchen area. She moved aside her small desk, revealing a loose floorboard that had been carefully replaced. What's in there? Candace asked suspiciously, her influencer instincts sensing content potential. Lauren took out her great-grandmother's key and inserted it into a small digital safe that had been hidden beneath. With a soft beep, the lid opened automatically. Inside was an old leather portfolio and another sealed envelope with official markings. Great-grandma told me to do the same thing every week, Lauren began to explain, her voice steady. Opening the portfolio revealed dozens of neatly arranged cryptocurrency wallet printouts and transaction records. Invest in digital currency with the same strategy every week. Cryptocurrency? Richard snorted dismissively. I never knew Melody was into that computer nonsense. What a waste of money. As if digital money ever makes real profit, Victoria scoffed, rolling her eyes. Great-grandma left me specific instructions, Lauren continued, ignoring their mockery. Use this investment strategy and purchase Bitcoin every week without fail for 20 years. And? Candace urged, leaning forward with growing interest. And for 5 years since great-grandma's death, I've been doing exactly that. For 5 years? Richard said incredulously, shaking his head. If you had that much money to invest, you could have helped the family instead. Lauren smiled quietly, feeling her great-grandmother's wisdom flowing through her. Great-grandma was a wise woman who understood the future. She took out the final envelope from the safe, breaking the official seal. It was new and bore the letterhead of a major cryptocurrency exchange. Last week, Lauren said quietly, opening the envelope, as usual, I checked the portfolio value as great-grandma instructed. And she pulled out the paper and showed it to her family with steady hands. It was an official cryptocurrency portfolio statement with digital signatures. At the top, it stated, total portfolio value, $200 million. The value reached $200 million last week. I've already completed the verification process. The room fell into complete silence, the only sound being the hum of Lauren's old refrigerator. The color drained from Victoria's face as reality hit her like a physical blow. Her hands began to tremble as she stared at the paper in disbelief, her breath coming in short gasps. You're joking, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Richard sank deep into the tiny couch, turning pale as his world shifted beneath him. Is it real? How is this possible? Yes, it's real, Lauren replied calmly, her voice carrying newfound authority. After taxes and conversion fees, it comes to about $140 million in liquid assets. $140 million? Candace was at a loss for words, her usual confidence evaporating. Her eyes were fixed on the cryptocurrency statement and her breathing became shallow and rapid. Their parents were too stunned to speak, just sitting there in shock like statues. Their hearts couldn't process the fact that the daughter they had long undervalued and treated as second best had suddenly acquired immense wealth. But we're family, Candace suddenly exclaimed, her voice taking on an unprecedented sweetness. There was desperation hidden beneath her suddenly caring tone. We're sisters, so we'll share it, right? Half and half would be fair, wouldn't it? Lauren maintained her gentle smile and shook her head slowly but firmly. I've already decided how to use the money. What do you mean? Victoria asked weakly, her voice cracking with emotion. We're your parents. You have an obligation to help us through our financial troubles. Obligation? For the first time, Lauren's voice took on a cold edge that cut through the air. For 34 years, I've been second in your family. If Candace was the sun, I was the moon, always a shadow. That's not true, Victoria desperately denied, tears beginning to form in her eyes. We loved you too. It's just that Candace was special, more photogenic. Special? Lauren interrupted, her calm exterior cracking slightly. Tonight's presents tell the whole story. A $1,500 iPhone for Candace, an expired gift card for me. That was a mistake, Victoria said in a trembling voice, grasping for excuses. A mistake? Tears welled in Lauren's eyes, but they never fell, held back by years of practice. Every Christmas, birthday, graduation, it was always the same pattern of neglect. Richard held his head in his hands, the weight of his failures crushing down on him. We were wrong. Please forgive us. We didn't know better. Only now? Lauren quietly asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because I've come into a large sum of money? Where was this remorse yesterday? A heavy silence descended upon the room like a suffocating blanket. Her parents stared at the floor, unable to answer or meet her gaze. Their guilt and regret weighed heavily in the air, making it hard to breathe. Candace had completely changed her attitude, her influencer mask slipping away. She stood up from her chair and approached Lauren with calculated movements. Lauren, we're sisters, aren't we? She said in a sweet voice that sounded foreign coming from her. I may have said terrible things to you, but that was just sibling rivalry. It will be different from now on. Lauren looked straight into Candace's eyes, seeing through the performance. She could see that there was no genuine remorse there, only naked desire and calculation. Candace, what did you say today at the barbecue? Lauren quietly asked, her memory sharp as a blade. Your novels don't even sell, do they? That's what you said, right? Candace was at a loss for words, her confident facade crumbling. Her own words from just hours ago were now piercing her heart like arrows. Let's talk about how the money will be used, Lauren said matter-of-factly, taking control. But that's for another day. It's getting late tonight. Wait. Candace cried out anxiously, but Lauren had already started walking toward the door. Let's meet in a week with lawyers and financial advisors. I'll tell you my decision then. Her parents and Candace stood up with dazed expressions, moving like people in a dream. Their steps were heavy as if they were sleepwalking through a nightmare. While heading toward the door, Victoria kept looking back, regarding Lauren with a pleading expression she had never shown before. As the door closed behind them, Lauren let out a deep sigh that seemed to release years of tension. She picked up her great-grandmother's photo and gazed at her gentle smile, feeling her presence. Great-grandma, you knew, didn't you? She whispered to the empty room. That someday this day would come, and I would need your strength. 1 week later, Lauren's studio apartment had been transformed into an orderly space. Her living room, normally filled with manuscript stacks and dying plants, now had a folding conference table set up. The afternoon light streaming through the windows gave the room a solemn atmosphere. On one side of the table sat Lauren with her lawyer Jessica Baker and financial advisor Dennis Carter. Across from them, her parents Victoria and Richard and Candace were seated with anxious expressions. Let's begin on time, Jessica said in a crisp voice. She was a sharp woman in her early 40s, dressed in a sleek navy blazer. Miss Lauren Harris has granted me full authority regarding her asset management. Today we will explain the plan. Over the past week, a storm had raged through the Harris family. After Lauren's revelation, her parents had called her multiple times, sometimes tearfully begging her to help the family. Candace had begun referring to Lauren as her amazing sister on social media and suddenly posting throwback photos from childhood. Furthermore, Lauren knew they had consulted a local lawyer to investigate their rights as family. First of all, Jessica continued, looking through the documents, at Lauren's request, the contents of this meeting will be recorded and preserved as a legal record. Please acknowledge this. Her parents and Candace exchanged anxious glances, but nodded silently. Now, Lauren, would you like to speak? Lauren stood up quietly. She was dressed slightly more formally than usual but without extravagance, wearing a simple black blazer. For many years, I was unloved and unvalued in this family, she began speaking quietly but with a firm voice. Birthdays, holidays, graduations, at every important milestone, I was in Candace's shadow. Lauren, that's... Her mom began, but fell silent under Jessica's stern gaze. But my great-grandma was different, Lauren continued. My great-grandma Melody recognized my worth and believed in my strength. She kept telling me, the time will come when your true worth is recognized. Lauren took a small breath and paused briefly. I struggled with what to do with this money. I could have sought revenge. I could have completely cut you off and ended our relationship. Her parents' faces turned pale. Candace bit her lip nervously. But great-grandma also taught me that hatred corrupts the heart. Her final gift wasn't just money, but giving me the power to choose. What do you mean? Candace asked in a small voice. Lauren gave a nod to Dennis, who operated his laptop, displaying charts on a portable screen. I will now tell you my decision, Lauren said calmly. Dad, all the debts of your dealership will be paid off. Additionally, $3 million will be provided as funds to rebuild the business. Richard's eyes widened in disbelief. This funding will be managed as a special trust fund and can only be used for legitimate business expenses. Strict conditions prevent wasteful spending or gambling. Lauren. Richard choked up. For my parents, I will provide sufficient funds for your retirement. This includes paying off your mortgage, covering medical expenses, and providing an adequate pension, Lauren continued. However, this too will be managed as a trust fund, provided in regular payments. You cannot receive it as a lump sum. Victoria took out a tissue and pressed it to her eyes. Her shoulders trembled slightly. And Candace. Candace leaned forward eagerly. Her eyes held a mix of expectation and anxiety. I will set up a conditional trust fund for you, Lauren said in a stern tone. First, all your debts will be paid off. I investigated your credit statements. The amount was more than I imagined. Candace blushed deeply. Her spending habits had been a secret even within the family. After that, you will receive a fixed monthly amount. But there are conditions. First, you must receive counseling on financial management. And second, you must volunteer regularly at literacy programs. Volunteer work? Candace repeated in surprise. Yes. Learn to work for others, Lauren said quietly. If there is proof of that, the trust fund payments will continue. Silence filled the room. Lauren's family was speechless. They had feared being completely cut off, but were overwhelmed by unexpected generosity. At the same time, they were surprised by the strictness of the conditions. Does my decision have legal binding power? Lauren asked Jessica. Yes, she nodded firmly. Everything has been legally prepared and signed. Changes are impossible. Why? Victoria suddenly raised her voice. Why are you doing this? Are you punishing us? Lauren showed a pained expression for the first time. What I wanted wasn't money, but love, her voice clearly struggled to contain her emotions. But I'm no longer seeking that. This is my way of giving back and freeing my own heart. She took a deep breath and continued. I'll use most of this money to establish a publishing house. A company to support struggling writers and those whose voices have been silenced. I want to create a world where everyone's story matters. With those words, the atmosphere in the room changed. Real tears began to flow from Victoria's eyes. They weren't tears of self-pity, but of deep regret. We were wrong. Lauren, we did terrible things to you, Richard said in a low voice. The past cannot be changed, Lauren said quietly. But the future is different. Candace sat silently, but there was something new in her expression. It wasn't envy or greed, but respect. She felt for the first time she gazed at her sister and saw not the moon she had looked down on for years, but a sun that had actually been shining all along. This concludes the meeting, Lauren said, closing the documents. As the family headed toward the door, Lauren called out to them. The publishing house will begin operations next month. If you're interested, please come and see. Her voice carried a faint echo of longing that had been suppressed for years. It wasn't a longing for love, but a small yet strong hope for understanding and reconciliation. A year had passed since Melody Books Publishing opened. Lauren, who once struggled as a ghostwriter, had become a successful publisher featured in literary magazines. The publishing house in downtown Greenbrook was housed in a converted warehouse, welcoming all writers. With the motto, "Every Voice Matters," the company published debut novels and memoirs from underrepresented communities. "I want to create a world where everyone's story is valued." These words had been featured in trade journals and touched many aspiring writers. Victoria and Richard Harris watched Lauren's success from a distance. Initially, shame prevented direct contact, but with time, their hearts began to change. Richard's dealership was rebuilt with improved customer service. Victoria began volunteering at literacy programs, learning to help others read. Candace's transformation was most remarkable. Volunteer work she reluctantly began had become central to her life. She joined Melody Books as social media coordinator for new authors. She still enjoyed fashion, but now promoted books and literacy. 2 weeks before Christmas, Lauren invited her family to the publishing house's annual holiday reading. The space was decorated with string lights and filled with authors reading their works. "Thank you for coming," Lauren greeted her parents and Candace at the entrance. There was no coldness in her voice, only quiet strength. "We can't change the past, but we can create the future." Victoria's eyes welled with tears. Richard nodded silently, truly seeing his daughter for the first time. Candace stepped forward and gently took her sister's hand. "Thank you for teaching me," she said quietly. Lauren understood the meaning behind those words. That night, the family faced each other on equal terms for the first time. Though reconciliation wasn't complete, it was a new beginning. Several months later, another birthday arrived. This year's celebration took place in Melody Books' courtyard. Simple tables were arranged for a party with published authors and families. Candace, now an important team member, had launched her own literacy campaign. "What I learned is that authentic stories are more powerful than manufactured content," she said in her speech. Her former superficiality had receded, replaced by genuine purpose. At the party's end, Lauren returned to her office, gazing at great-grandmother Melody's photo. She smiled quietly. "I have found the true wealth you taught me about." The sunset illuminated her figure through the window. Once called the moon, she now shone with her own light. And that light continued to illuminate others as well.